Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Minister, for your introduction. Dear President Nishani, my dear friend, dear former prime ministers, former presidents, former ministers, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your very warm welcome. It is an honor to be here with you in this effort to promote global human rights through cultural diplomacy. This conference and its key message that human rights matter and they must matter globally is timely. We meet to elevate human rights and their importance against a dramatic backdrop. As countless images of human suffering and unspeakable crimes against those caught up in the middle of the brutal conflict of women and children now stream almost in real time from Aleppo, creeping into our living rooms, in the news feed of our social media presence, in our consciousness, even if and when we take our eyes away from them. As someone who has been at the receiving end of Serbia's brutal war in Kosovo, this suffering is still very vivid, very close to my own skin. The only reason I stand before you today, the only reason I have a voice to represent my country and tell its history, it's because of people like yourselves who 2 decades ago rose up across capitals. From Washington, D.C. to Berlin, from London to Paris, from Madrid and Rome, in governments and executive boardrooms, in media and civil society, to say, no, not now, not ever again. Because they stood determined to defend human rights of strangers, people they never met, with whom they didn't share neither blood and soil ties nor language, and despite the eventual political cost. So today, I can't think of a better place to offer my thoughts on human rights and cultural diplomacy than Berlin, than in Germany, a country that has shown unmatched global leadership and vision in defense of human rights and in defending the most vulnerable. You have opened your gates to refugees who are fleeing from the war. Take it from someone who has lived through one. No one ever wants to leave their home. They were forced by brutality to make this difficult choice, and I applaud those among you who have embraced them. One day, just like me, the people you are sheltering will be that powerful living proof of how your generosity, your principled stance of human rights has made all the difference. When I speak in the front of audiences outside Kosovo, it is very important for me to point out that Kosovo is no longer a war-torn country. Since 2008, it is an independent state, Europe's youngest state. This does not mean that we have it all figured out. We actually don't, far from it. But in these 2 decades of the state building, we have learned so much, mostly from our own mistakes. There have been many positive changes and numerous setbacks. We have triumphed, we have fallen, and we have shown tremendous resilience. One of those positive aspects that I am confident, and even maybe somewhat subjective, has created direct and indirect lasting impact has been the election of the first woman president, a position I was honored and privileged to hold for 5 years. But that is not the only positive aspect that I'd share about Kosovo, the young but brave country. Today, I want to talk about how artists in Kosovo have found meaning in the collective trauma of the war, how they have used it to reconcile and provoke the society to break the barriers among us, and in some cases, to even dispel some traditional myths. As witnesses to the physically devastated country and emotionally wrecked society, they took on their own hands the responsibility to heal the society through their art. In these times, if you can imagine, words became very hard to utter, and what was left was a deep, wordless, silent communication among us. Our artists became our mediators that steered Kosovo toward a more universal understanding of human rights by using the universal language of art. They assisted the communication in families, in better communities, across the ethnic lines, across the globe. And the question is, how did they do that? During the war, Kosovo Albanian men were singled out and killed. Women were treated as a loot of war, often raped in order to dishonor them, to humiliate their families, to strike terror. Thousands of women were raped during the war in Kosovo. Hundreds of men were also sexually abused. To this day, we do not know the exact number, but we rely on the data provided by experts that put this number at 20,000. In the chaotic aftermath of the war and the absence of justice for survivors, most of them stayed in complete silence. Some who decided to come forward to their family members were abandoned by them due to the stigma that rape carries in Kosovo, though Kosovo is not unique in this. Survivors rarely came forward to speak of the horror that has been exercised on them. And Kosovo society will just not talk about it, in part because for many years we did not know how to handle it. When courts, local and international, failed to secure justice for 15 years, I, as the president, made the pledge that the country we created, for which they have suffered so much, would no longer fail them. This issue has become very personal to me. With the help of the women activists who had worked for years to help rape victims, I took institutional steps to provide access to justice and health, as well as economic empowerment for all the victims. We advocated strongly and managed to provide them with a legal protection. But the issue of the rape exceeded the institutions. It was about the society coming together as a whole to recognize the survivors, stop their stigmatization, and join them in speaking out and seeking justice. It was about the society realizing that it could have happened to all of us. It could have happened to me. The Kosovo-born artist Atifete Jahjaga had an idea how to close the void. She asked women and men across Kosovo to donate a skirt that she would hang in a long clotheslines across a football stadium of Kosovo's capital, Pristina, to once blur the lines between the survivors and the rest of us. To bring the issue visually to the forefront, to do it on the anniversary of Kosovo's liberation, in a place so masculine and so big to drive the point of just how many it affected. That not all of us are more precise that those among us were liberated. And lastly, without much explanation, to show the support for the survivors of the wartime rape. For a month's time, thousands of women and men throughout the country donated skirts in solidarity with the survivors. They spoke through their donation. Many people, including survivors, shared dresses they wore on the special occasions. A skirt worn at a brother's wedding. A dress a member of the parliament wore the day that she signed the Independence Declaration. There were also dresses of sad occasions. a gown of a marriage that fell apart because of the rape, a skirt worn on the day of the rape with an inscription. This skirt conceals a horrific story. It also bears the day of the rape. They were hung on the capital's football stadium to show the magnitude of this form of torture and to recognize that the shame did not fall upon the victims, but the perpetrators of this horrendous crime. Former fighters, celebrities, members of the parliament, ministers, and thousands of ordinary people joined to symbolically tell them that they were not alone. And they did it through the artistic engagement with them to create a truly moving piece of art that spoke universally across the world. Its strong message of rape as a war crime, of quest of equality and justice, recognition and reconciliation was understood by everybody. We woke up to the newspapers and televisions from Spain to places as far as Australia, featuring the installation because it spoke to so many, raising awareness of this abuse of the human rights. This grave war crime could not be silenced any longer. In Kosovo, the impact of the art installation exceeded our expectation. I saw a society that changed the tone of the conversation and the attitudes around this issue. We also saw the support from some unlikely places. Just last month, imams in mosques across Kosovo, which continue to be important social and religious venues in traditional areas of Kosovo, dedicated a sermon, a weekly prayer, to guide their believers that survivors of the wartime rape in Kosovo are treated with dignity. An important step, not just of recognizing and healing, but of acceptance and awareness of human rights and dignity. It is in this kind of actions that have used art as an avenue of expression to rally the society around the social issue. I have found much inspiration and assurance for the future of struggling country, because art has proven to be an effective tool of education and debate, of awareness raising, and of the protest. In exploring feelings and emotions of growing up amid war and carnage, amid major shift from communism to fledgling democracy, combining Kosovo's bitter past and their personal experience, Kosovo's artists have been able to speak to the larger themes in pair with the conversations of their peers across Europe and beyond. So, my dear ladies and gentlemen, through their work, Kosovo's young artists have put the country, which unfortunately remains the most isolated place in Europe, on the map and have been its most effective ambassadors. From Rita Ora, the Kosovo-born British star and Kosovo's honorary ambassador, who recalls her family's experience as a refugee from Kosovo to the United Kingdom to raise awareness of the plight of Syrian refugees, to Dua Lipa, the upcoming Queen of Pop, who is based in London, who just recently opened a foundation to provide an equal chance to Kosovo young artists to thrive. Artists have shared our story of struggle and resilience. They have been the living proof of why human rights matter and how humanity did not fail in Kosovo. Due to the travel restrictions imposed on Kosovo, as it is the only place in Europe where citizens cannot travel visa-free, artists have not surrendered. In the Ottoman-era city of Prizren, they have opted for a paradigm shift. For 15 years, they have ended their isolation and created amazing avenues of cooperation by bringing European and the rest of the world-class artists to the DocuFest. a documentary and a short film festival themed on promotion of human rights and democratic values through film, which now proudly is listed among the most relevant cultural events of this kind globally. They did this for the first time earlier this year as they walked the red carpet in the Oscars ceremony for the first time with a 21-minute-long movie Shock or Friend to show the toll of Kosovo's war on the lives and friendship of the two 12-year-old boys. Their work has reached places that politics has yet to reach. In the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, there lies a long chain of the containers filled with rubble that depict the precious stones of a necklace that belonged to the mother of Petrit Halilaj, the promising artist from Kosovo, who became the first contemporary artist to represent Kosovo in a Venice Biennale. The necklace, which his mother hidden in the garden, was the only piece of the past that survived the war. And the rubble in the containers is the rubble of their burned down house. But human rights in the context of war are not the only preoccupation of the Kosovar artists. More recently, as an act of the political resistance and the social activism, we are increasingly witnessing artists challenge society's preconceived norms about gender and identity, especially in defending the rights of the most marginalized groups, including the LGBT community, which are constitutionally guaranteed but still faced with a major discrimination. In Pristina's main square, the group Have It, of women artists, read aloud and distributed poetry of famous Albanian authors, which had been forbidden because of its homosexual content. They kissed on the Valentine's Day to demonstrate that love knows no boundaries. To challenge nationalism and xenophobia, they vividly wrote, "What color is your flag when it burns?" They shave their faces to shave off patriarchy, for, they said, manhood cannot be measured with the mustaches and beards. Organizations, too, have relied on arts as the common denominator to speak to audiences across cultural divides about the universality of the human rights, and to raise awareness of the fate of 1,800 missing persons from the war in Kosovo. The Youth Initiative for the Human Rights has covered the capital city of Pristina, the main square, with empty shoes. They built a wall with the names. They lit 1,800 lanterns with the question marks. Again, no word was spoken, but it was all well understood. I thank you very much for your presence and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Atifete, if you were not the president, perhaps Kosovo wouldn't be able to overcome the trauma that it has gone through. So Kosovo owes you a lot, especially for using art to overcome the scourge and the difficulties of that time. I'm sure that there will be many questions to you, but we are going to limit it because we are slightly behind schedule. First question.
My name is Dragan Domzet. I come from Belgrade. I was the minister in Đinđić government, and I was one of ministers that make decision that we deliver Milosevic to The Hague. So I have been opponent of Milosevic all the time. But I must confess that I'm a little bit disappointed of your talk and speech. As a young politician, I expected that you work about reconciliation, about the future, how Serbs and Albanians can live together, how we can collaborate, trade, and enjoy the life as the rest of life. You're full of emotions, but it's a one-side story, black and white. And every war is not black and white, it's gray, it's dark. I can talk many minutes. Similar story that Serbs had in Kosovo. Because I saw in my town, Niš, that is very near, as you know, a lot of refugees from Kosovo. They had to leave their houses, destroy families. They were also killed. Tens of church and monastery were destroyed. You know all this fact. But you didn't give any word about this. So we cannot be biased. We must be universal. I agree with your, what you said, but you didn't say all the story. So if we want to reconcile and we want to live together and we have to live together, we must really be objective and accept what is the truth and forget it. Let's talk about our interest. Let's make a highway, Niš-Pristina. Let's trade first. Let's protect the security of people there. And let's build together our future life. This kind of talk probably had some reasons 10 years ago or more, but not these years. Stop talking about this because it makes negative emotion among young people. They want revenge and so on. Rapes were everywhere. Serbian women also was raped. But let's forget it. We have to condemn those who are abused, but don't generalize it. So my suggestion is that we talk more about the future and not about the past. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And former minister, if I'm not wrong, yeah. If you have listened to me carefully on my remarks today, I did not mention the ethnicity of neither one crime or the other crime. If you have recalled in my very last sentence, and I said about 1,800 missing people, within this 1,800 people are also about 500 Kosovo Serbs, which are within this group. And so also within the rape victims as a tool of war, there are other ethnicity groups which are of the Kosovo Bosniak, of the Kosovo Roma, Ashkali, and other ethnicity groups, which I considered and I continue considering as one of the biggest treasure of our country, of our heritage. I wouldn't agree with you when we say that we should forget the past. No, we cannot forget the past. It will be very unfair towards our people to ask from them to forget their past. But I would say that we should ask from our people to use the past as a reference of moving forward. And that's why Kosovo has started a political dialogue between the Republic of Kosovo and the Republic of Serbia, not forgetting the past, but how to build a different future for the sake of our people and for the sake of our citizens. Because we don't have a scaling here to put what was done wrong and what has been done right. Because we are a living proof of that almost 18 years ago, we have inherited a country which has been totally destroyed, not only in the human lives, people, over tens and thousands people killed and massacred, starting from a 90 years old people up to the pregnant woman. You know that because you, as you said in the very beginning, that you has handed over Milosevic towards the Tribunal of Hague, where there are the pictures and evidences of even the pregnant woman which has been killed and massacred, and their belly has been opened and the child has been taken out of the stomach. I'm not speaking about over 1 million Kosovo Albanians that has been made by force to leave the country for the purpose of the ethnic cleansing. And I don't speak about other massacres that has been done. I cannot say that we are not proud also of some other crimes which has done immediately after the war and during the issue that you mentioned about the churches and the monasteries there, which Kosovo traditionally and throughout the history, we are the one that has protected, because these are not only the Serbian cultural heritage, but these are also the Kosovar cultural heritage. And 8% of the Kosovar Serbs which are living in Kosovo, they are the citizens of Kosovo. And I'm proud of the Serbian citizens which has decided to live in Kosovo. And I have been one of the most voiced politicians in our country, calling for all of the Serbs who has left the country to come back, because their future is within Kosovo, is with the rest of the ethnic groups living there. And that is it only that we are going to build a different future, not the past that we have gone through, which has left deep wounds and deep consequences. But it's our institutional but also a moral obligation to build a different future for our people. Reconciliation, yes, by all means, but not reconciliation without a justice. So the justice is first in order to open the grounds and roots for the proper reconciliation and to bring the peace in the hearts of every single citizen, not only in Kosovo, but the entire region, because we are forgetting Bosnia, we are forgetting Croatia and the other parts there.
Thank you very much. Of course, we are not going to solve the problems here. If there are further exchange of views, you are from the Balkans, so you can continue outside. But here, the ICD offers you this forum in order to unearth the problems, but it cannot be solved in this forum. So we are going to still remain in the Balkans and turn to Her Excellency the Ambassador of Bulgaria in Poland, isn't it?
It's more complicated than that.
Okay.
Now in Poland,
your question.
Formerly
okay, fine.
in the US, and it won't be a question. It will be kind of a continuation of this discussion, but starting on a more cheerful note, Madam President, my son, and as I was telling Mark, my son was one of the panel of jurists at the docu-festival in Kosovo just last August, and he was very excited about what this festival had to offer as energy potential, again about the region. But interestingly, that it's such a connection. You brought me, what, 15 years ago in my own life. I've had different lives, as I mentioned earlier today, and one of them was an MP in the Council of Europe. And I was charged with the very challenging task of being the rapporteur of the Council of Europe for the situation of human rights in Kosovo in connection with the war there. Mm-hmm. So over a year, I visited all camps of displaced persons. Not just Kosovo, but the entire region. And I must say that what you were telling brought physical memories. I talked to so many people, but displaced persons from Kosovo, and as well as Kosovars in Kosovo itself. I was there before the war, during the war. On the day of the armistice, I happened to be there, and we celebrated it at the then ambassador's residence for kind of a description, very, very broad residence there. And I was there after the armistice was signed. And the truth of the matter is, and this is important, of course, to the young people here, that there was suffering and sacrifice on both sides. There was all these stories you're telling. I've talked to the victims in those tents with the families, with the young children. And they were telling me, we will never forget. And these were young Kosovar families that were chased out of their country. I was talking to Serbs, similar thing, which was the revenge part that came later. In other words, we have all the complexity of a war situation where unfortunately everybody can be either a victim or a perpetrator. So I would think that it is indeed important, based on the lessons of that period and of that particular story of the Balkans, to remember, I agree with you, that should not be forgotten, because it can easily be repeated. But try and find ways of healing. It takes decades. It won't be easy, and we know that. I'm from there. I'm from the Balkans. We have our own stories, neighborly, nice stories with other countries, which I find literally outdated and waste of energy, waste of potential. So let's think of the potential which these countries possess. This is an emerging region in Europe. I believe in what the future role of our countries will be. And I would just like to thank you for stating the case of your country, to tell you that there are people in this room, probably I'm the only one who was an eyewitness of everything that went on in a matter of me personally for a year and a half. When I was trying to go into the rape stories, either way, I was told that it was hazardous to my life even. So I would talk secretly to people, but I would be warned, this is the end, you stop here, you cannot go any further, when I was collecting data for the Council of Europe investigation. So basically, I just want, if I can make this appeal, togetherness. This was, as I was mentioning earlier this morning, my motto today, and for today's discussion, but also probably for many more years to come. I think we should start from the notion of togetherness and how best we can achieve some degree. It cannot be ideal. It will never be 100%, or not in our lifetime. But at least how to gradually start moving towards this togetherness, which is our best guarantee for our own lives and for our own futures. Thank you, Madam President.
Ambassador, thank you very much. And I also want to thank you for your contribution on your role being at the refugee camps within Kosovo, but also outside of Kosovo, in the most difficult time for our country and our people. I want to illustrate you with a very simple example. It was maybe just a few hours before I left coming towards Germany. I had open remarks in one of the Kosovo Women's Network conference. And I finished my open remarks and coming out because I spoke also about the survivors of the sexual violence, because first of all, as a woman, I take it also as a personal mission to regulate their status within a country and also to tackle the culture of impunity, which is existing 18 years after the end of the war and 8 years of the independence. And while I was coming out, one of the ladies stopped me there, said, "Madam President, you asked from us to move on, but how to hell I can move on? Because I am a mother of 3 children, of 3 daughters. I was 38 years old when I was raped. My older daughter was 17 years old when she was raped. My other daughter was 15 years old when she was raped. The youngest daughter was 13 years old and she was with Down syndrome when she was raped. And exactly the same day, her mother jumped in the whale of the water, committing suicide because she couldn't cope to see what has happened to her 3 granddaughters and to her daughter." On purpose, I mentioned that we need to move, we cannot forget the past, but we have to use that as a reference of moving forward, exactly as you said, because can be easily repeated on that. And we should not use our citizens as the bargaining chip. We should use them as a bridges of the cooperation, because that's why we are here as well in this summit or the conference as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that there are many other participants who would like to ask questions, but we are short of time. We are ahead of our, behind our schedule. And we thank you very much for very precise explanation that you gave. Of course, the past should not be forgotten. With Bulgaria, we had also difficulty, but we decided to bury our methods and we continue our way. And I'm sure that in the Balkans, the other countries will do the same. Thank you very much, and I invite you to thank again.
Thank very much.